Modern dog culture is part of the culprit with raising property taxes. Especially right now, we have 90 million at least dogs in the United States. Globally, the United States has the most dogs. So dogs are a huge part of our culture. So let's look up a little bit of information about property taxes. So according to a few sources, there's been a significant increase of 27.4% since 2019. And today is 2025. So that's a pretty large increase. So people are paying a lot more for these property taxes. Now, the mainstream information for the most part says this is because of rising property values. But, have you guys looked around? Some of these properties are in bad shape. Lots of homeless camps moving in, lots of properties with like 3 or 4 RVs out front, and garbage and stray dogs. So let's look a little bit deeper, and we don't have to scroll down too far. But the reason to increase taxes is, look at this blue highlight, is for the local government to fund essential services. Yes, like the police, the fire department, and stuff like that. So let's look at some essential services that are being drastically increased because of dog culture. So first, let's look at police services. So property taxes, as we mentioned in the last little slide there, they're a significant source of funding for police departments, salaries, benefits, operational costs. Local governments allocate these tax revenues to various public sources, including law enforcement. So police is there to protect private property, and that's what you're paying taxes on, your private property. If you rent, then your rent goes to help the homeowner pay for those taxes. So isn't it interesting that police have to protect private property from dogs, but dogs are said to be protectors? Interesting. So one of the things that police officers have to do is respond to dog bite calls. So police calls related to dog bites have been increasing, with approximately 4.5 million dog bites occurring annually in the U.S., leading to significant injuries and hospital visits. Hospital visits, another thing that can be partly paid for by our property taxes. Because when the hospital has to send out, for example, an ambulance, the ambulance has to drive on maintained roads that are maintained by your property taxes. And they're driving on those roads to respond to dog attacks. So let's read the rest. This rise in incidents has raised concerns about the responsibility of dog owners and the use of police dogs in law enforcement. So there's also a police dog element to this conversation. But yeah, dog bites get worse and worse. Calls for dog issues get worse and worse. And who has to respond to that? Police officers. There's a fairly well-known case in Texas that happened where an Air Force veteran, was killed by a pit bull. His wife was severely injured. And there were something like 120 previous calls to the police department before they finally did something about that dog. Another thing that can happen when the police officer is dispatched to deal with some dog issue is police officers also get bit by domestic dogs, which means that's also going to be another hit to your property taxes. Somebody bites a police officer, now they got to take time off, their uniform has to get replaced, the emergency medical equipment in the back of their car has to be used to stop the bleeding, because sometimes police officers get bit by some big nasty pit bulls and other dogs, and they need stitches and they need to have the blood stopped from flowing out of their body. So all the equipment that goes into police officers being bit by dogs, that's another hit on your property taxes. And police being bit by dogs is increasing. The more dogs that we have in our community, the more that the police officers get physically and mentally taxed by dogs. And that's coming right out of your property taxes. This issue of police officers having to deal with dog-related incidences, this has been going on for a while. Here's a PDF from Community Oriented Policing Services. But they talk about this. A big problem with being a police officer is dealing with dog owners and their problems. And it's not just like barking and noise complaints. It's fighting, people fighting because of their dogs, um, parks having dog fights in them. So I mean, just look at some of these. There's plenty of information out there about this, but it's like this summary says right here. Police respond to dog related calls frequently. Handling animals complaints often falls under their responsibilities. Animal control officers are unavailable sometimes. So, yeah, police officers have to deal with dogs all the time, guys. So, another thing that your property taxes fund is the fire departments. The fire department itself, all the equipment, the fire trucks, but also the roads, because you got to have a good road to be able to dispatch the fire truck. So, like if you drive by a fire station, you're not supposed to park in front of there. Your car will get towed. And the roads need to be maintained to use the fire trucks. Another thing that comes out of your property taxes. But look at this. Fire departments frequently respond to rescue dogs from dangerous situations like cliffs and frozen ponds. These can pose risks to both the animals and their owners. So dogs are constantly doing bullshit like this. The more dogs in your community, the more this happens. A pond freezes over, the dog goes in there chasing after a duck. Fire department has to handle it. Dog falls off a cliff, dog runs into the zoo, like in San Diego. That's happened in San Diego. Oregon coast, dogs fall off the cliff. San Diego, dogs chasing wild goats off the cliff. These fire departments right here, these are the people that have to go save these dogs, and that's all coming out of your property taxes. One of the things that happens, like look at some of these pictures right here. Every time this happens, everybody thinks it's the coolest thing, and oh my goodness, they saved the dog. But your property taxes are getting raised. Irresponsible idiot dog owners allow their dogs to do this. Dogs that are supposed to be man's best friend and protectors constantly need taxpayer funded services to rescue their dumbasses off of cliffs, frozen ponds, and everything else. People even call the fire department when they see a dog in a car. Like, dogs can actually survive some pretty high and low temperatures. Like hunting dogs, for example, they run in the snow for hours. But yet we see a dog out in the snow or in a hot car and we freak out. And then who do we call? The police or the fire department. Taxpayer funded, property tax funded services for dogs. So that has been a little summary of some of the domestic dogs and their cost to the city services that are paid for by your property tax. But what about the police themselves? What about the police dogs? Yep, your property tax pays for those police dogs because they're part of the budget of the police. But what else does your property tax pay for? Lawsuits against police dog bites through taxpayer funds. That's right, police dogs have a track record that most people are unaware of biting innocent people and costing huge payouts. And where does that come from? It comes from your taxpayer money, your property taxes. So not only do your taxes pay for the presence of the police dog, but your taxes pay for all the huge payouts for police dog bites. I'm not going to look at those too deep in this video, but you can easily find this. There's some recent one in Oregon. I think it was around 80,000 in Portland, Oregon for a similar lawsuit. And that one wasn't even a police dog. It was animal control, and police failed to do anything about multiple calls for a stray pit bull, and then it bit a person that had a business. And so they sued the city for not protecting them. You're paying property taxes to be protected from dogs on your property. And so, yeah, that's another lawsuit that gets paid for by your property taxes. There's all types of information about this. A simple internet search with some creative keywords in these articles, and you can find all this stuff for yourself. And these police dog bites, it's crazy because they're increasing more frequently. So the more that we tax our citizens so that we can have police dogs, the more that we're going to double tax them by attacking them with the police dogs. And then we're going to make them pay for it with their freaking property taxes. Do you guys realize like how freaking nasty and sinister this is? It's ridiculous. One of the best places you can find a lot of this information and stories and personal accounts is the Marshall Project. So just want to do a little shout out to that. They got a lot of information about this. So here's one of the lawsuits that I was mentioning in Portland, Oregon. So this woman in Portland received $404,044.75 after being injured by a pit bull. So that's not a police dog, but these lawsuits can be against the city. So if the city refuses to protect its citizen from a dog, these people can go after the city. But that's going to be from the city's budget. They have a budget to pay off big amounts like this. And what people don't kind of understand about this is the downstream effect. So just think about this. See some of these numbers? Here's one right here, 500,000. And we're talking about this one up here, 400,000, but the next year that they go look at their city budget and decide if they're going to raise taxes, they're going to look at these payouts that they're paying out for dog bites, and they're going to use that as leverage to make a decision to raise your taxes. This is just like a big organization like a highway organization or something. If they've spent a bunch of money during the year, they can use that as leverage to say, hey, we got to increase our budget. We have to ask for more federal funds. We have to ask for more funds from our citizens. So the downstream effect of these dog bite payouts, it's just giving the city more leverage to take more money from you as a property owner or a renter or a small business owner that wants to rent a little shop. So it's not just the single payouts that we should be considering. It's just the fact that this goes on so much. All these cities across America, they're going to look at this like, oh crap, there's a good chance we're going to pay out for police dog bites. There's a good chance we're going to pay out because we failed to protect our citizens. So we better raise the budget next year. And it just gives them leverage to take more and more money from you. You're already paying to have your private property protected by these dogs. And then they're going to make you pay for the lawsuits that happen because of them, and they're going to raise your taxes next year. But yeah, that's just a little example from Oregon. There's several of these in almost every city across America, especially the bigger cities. But it's a hit on your property taxes, and it's like a double hit. It's just like I mentioned before. You pay to have your privacy and your protection. Then you get attacked by a dog or a police dog, and then the police have to come. And if they don't do it right, then there's a lawsuit, and then you're going to pay for the lawsuit too. Yeah, so that's been a look at how dog culture raises our property taxes in several different ways. What do you guys think? See you in the next one.